Hi there, guys. So just wanted to pick up on some news from last week in which the government confirmed that they won't now be going ahead with a plan to trial free bus passes for the under 22s. That suggestion, so free bus passes for under 22s, it came from the Transport Committee, and that's a cross party group of backbench MPs. And they wrote a report in August which said that the idea would promote access to jobs and education for young people and that the government should go ahead with it. So, of course, by now, my expectations of this government are extremely low. But it's amazing how somehow they always manage to go below even those rock bottom expectations. So, this is a government that bang on incessantly about growth. They talk all the time about getting young people into work and away from benefits, and how there are too many young people who are neat, that there's too many young people in receipt of PIP. And then it's also a government that committed in its manifesto to reducing child poverty. And then you factor in that over the weekend there was also news that nearly 1 million young people in this country are not in education, employment or training. So what happens when an opportunity arises to put their money where their mouth is? Well, of course, they just shy away from taking any real action. Now, in the article, which some of which you can see on screen, they talk about the impact of poor connectivity for young people, and they give the example of young people, being unable to take a job for that very reason, or young people struggling to get into college. And there was also research done following the Scottish Government's implementation of free bus travel for young people under the age of 22. So the Scottish Government introduced that policy 3 years ago. The research found that it helped to eradicate child poverty and that it helped to grow the economy. So then let's look at it from their perspective. Why are they choosing not to go ahead with this? Well, they claim that there's no money in this spending review. And judging by the news stories about the upcoming budget and the struggles that Rachel Reeves is having, perhaps they're right. Reeves, she doesn't want to add costs that are going to affect, the amount of fiscal headroom she's got. And she's already scratching around for spending cuts and for tax rises to balance the books. But question the logic of all that, and I would argue very strongly that this sort of policy pays for itself. So obviously you get all the benefits that I've already talked about, in terms of supporting young people into work, of helping them access education or training, but then you also put money directly into their pockets, because every single penny that a young person is not spending on travel is money that is going to go directly into the wider economy via their own spending. Because who spends money? Young people. Money goes through the hands of young people like water, whether it's on clothes, going out, coffees, tat off the internet, all that spending and all that money going direct into the real economy on goods and services. So ultimately, this is just another example of what I would call Treasury brain overruling sensible policy. It seems to me that the default position within this government and within the Treasury is just to cut or to minimise spending. And more broadly than that, it seems to me that they've bought into this notion that government spending equals bad and cuts equals good. And that's presumably alongside the notion that it's only private sector investment which can unlock growth in this country. So for me, the whole thing is a serious misstep. And I think it speaks to a broader issue, which is that this government are sort of wedded to an orthodoxy which is just out of date and which condemns them to just continually make the same mistakes over and over. Sensible policies like this, which would boost growth, which would help young people into work or education, and which would reduce child poverty, get overlooked on the altar of fiscal responsibility. It's short-sighted, it's nonsensical in its own terms, and it's, of course, entirely predictable for this government. And in that sense, it's just a metaphor for England in 2025, in my opinion. So yeah, let me know in the comments, guys, what do you think about this one? Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.